Welcome back to Africa This Week. Often seen holding a dry stick over the shoulders with a faded hat on the head and sometimes with a dagger stuck to the waist, herdsmen guiding their cattle in search of greener pastures are a common sight, not just in Nigeria but across Africa. But in recent years, that easygoing nature attributed to the group now looks to be something of the past, as recurring killings in the country are now credited to the suspected nomadic cattlemen who go outside their trade to kidnap, kill and destroy. Joining me to dig deep on Africa this week is Achike Chude, a political analyst based in Lagos, Nigeria. Welcome to the program.
Thank you, Fade.
Well, Plateau State seems to have been relatively a peaceful state before all these killings. How did they degenerate to this point?
Well, relatively, relatively in terms of the time this particular event, unfortunate event happened. Plateau State for quite some time, in fact, for years,
yes.
Before now, it used to be known as one of the most peaceful states in the country. And so whenever you had people coming into the country because of the ideal weather condition and so on. It's a place you could
choose to go there.
Yeah, a lot of people would choose to go there for their holidays and all of that. So that was the target had at a time. But that changed, and that has changed for quite some time. For the past few years, we have seen a lot of violence. Though the last few incidences of violence we have had, in a way, seem to have excluded Plateau State in recent times. And a lot of people now thought that perhaps it was as a result of the anti-grazing law that seemed to be causing some disquiet in some quarters, very small quarters in the country and all of that. But Plateau State does not have an anti-grazing law. And so that means that there are some other things that are going on beyond even the issue of grazing. So it is really, really, unfortunate about what has happened in Plateau State. But again, that is the nature of violence. It is said that when you allow evil, to fester in the public space, eventually it will get to the doorsteps of your house. And I think that is, what is happening. All of these acts of violence are indicative of a breakdown in the structure and, the security of the country. And so, if it could happen in one place unchecked, unhindered, undisturbed, then it could happen in any other place. And we have seen, the series of violence in the country spreading from the Middle Belt, some of the states in the Middle Belt, Adamawa, Zamfara, Benue, Taraba. It has moved westwards. We had an incident in Ondo State the other time, then Edo State, then Enugu State, Ebonyi State, and all of that. So some of these attacks are sporadic, but it is also spreading, though for now it is more or less heavily concentrated in the middle eastern part of this, middle belt part of this country.
We've mentioned Plateau, we've also mentioned the middle belt, and people have said that the perpetrators of this crime are not actually the herders who are the native herders of the middle belt, that the perpetrators are actually from outside. What are your thoughts?
Well, I think, with this, with the constant speculations about the real or the true identities of these marauders and killers, is a very heavy indictment on the government of the day. If this event has gone on for a few years now, and then we are still having some, disjointed statements about the true identity of these people from the government, then it tells you that all exactly is not well in governance. We have been given different stories, or statements about the identity. The president himself said that there were people from Libya, former militants who fought during the Gaddafi era and all of that, came in with their guns and they are destabilizing the system. If that is the truth, it's an indictment on the government. Regardless of the identities of these people, the government has a duty. Then they have moved from that, to say that they are people who are also avenging the theft of their cattle and all of that. Again, if that is the case,
Reprisal
it means
attacks.
you have an idea about who these people are and all of that.
Yeah.
You have not gone after them. It's an indictment. Then we are now being told that they are political opponents of the president and so on. So if the president makes this statement or people from government make these statements, it means they have an idea. Or unless they're just making statements from the air, which also is also dangerous for this country, because it means that those who govern us today do not know exactly what is going on. And so they are just making conjectures. I think by now we have gone, or we should have gone beyond these conjectures. The fact that they make categorical statements about who and who are doing this means that they have an idea about the people that are doing it. And if they have an idea, what have they done about it? Do they lack the ability? Are they in a position to stop it? If they are not in a position to stop it, what now happens? Are they now saying that the country has been left to run on its own, and that all of us, and that was the worrying thing when the president, addressed some elders recently in the north after this last mayhem, and then was now resorting to calling Nigerians to pray because the government has done its best. That's a very frightening scenario being painted by the president about the ability of the Nigerian state to keep the citizens safe. And for me, I want to believe other people, I will not accept a situation where, we are told that this country is too weak to stem the tide of internal insurrection, and that we should just throw our hands in the air and then give up and then now resort only to prayers without action. Prayers without works is dead.
Well, talking about government now, why is it becoming increasingly difficult for this government to stem this particular rampage? In spite of every other attempt they have tried cattle ranches, they have tried cattle colonies, they've tried everything.
Yeah, well, those ones are still in the works, the issue of cattle ranches and all of that. Of course, from even the statements, again, and that is the unfortunate thing, there is a lot of, like I said, disconnect, disjointed statements, unfortunate statements coming out from a very top hierarchy of government, especially those in charge of security, where the Minister of Defense, for instance, talks about reprisal killings and so on as a consequence of the anti-grazing law. That is frightening, because it gives the impression that he himself is not happy about the law that has been passed. And the IG comes and says, look, you need to reverse this law that was, legally entered into, and promulgated by a constituted state authority in Benue State and all of that. And then the IG says, you have to do this so that this will stop. It's frightening in the sense that it tells you that it would seem that the security, those who are heading very critical and pivotal security institutions in this country would seem to have taken sides by that statement. Because you don't see them condemning the killings. You don't see them, making promises on behalf of the victims and on behalf of the dead, that they are going to bring them to book. But they are saying, look, this is what is responsible for the breakdown of law and order. This is what is responsible for the killings of Nigerians. So you do this, remove this law so that Nigerians can be safe. And that is not their bit. That is not they do not have such an authority. The authority that is given to them is the authority, and that's why they also equip them with men and equipment and so on to keep the country safe. Getting involved in political discourse and taking positions, and expressing their views on this, I think is way beyond, the authority that they have. And it is unfortunate. So when you hear these statements from such people, it worries you. And again, it's critical that people must believe in their institutions, that Nigerians must believe in the people who head these institutions. It is good that the president has given, that impression recently, that he's aware that people are insinuating that he has a hand in what is going on, though he quickly moved to deny that. But denial is not, does not automatically make it so. He has to be seen to be doing something. And for a very long time, this president has not been seen, in terms of his body language, the kind of statements he makes, the kind of statements the people under him make, and so on, have not given people that impression that the president is neutral on this matter. And
talking about removing laws, shouldn't there be something else we should be removing? I mean, we're in July now, come tomorrow, and since January we've had these attacks. By now, shouldn't the security chiefs have been changed?
Well, that is the biggest mystery of it all, seriously. But of course, again, ultimately everything stops at the
bulk of the president's
yes, at the table
desk.
of the president.
Yeah.
I remember when Ibrahim Babangida gave that speech to Nigerians about the annulment of the June 12th election in 1993. He did admit that no matter what, that there were so many things that led to that action and so on. But he knows that as head of state, as the president of this country, that the buck stops at his table, that he will take responsibility, and that is what we are saying. That regardless of what is going on, the chief security of this country is the president. The man who has been mandated by the constitution to keep us safe is the president, and all of that. So the president has a duty. You understand? And I think it is the duty of Nigerians to encourage him, to also support him, to ensure that he does the right thing. But if he does not, and you will continue to see body counts in this country, then we must begin to speak out. And I think, again, the question you asked about why he has not removed the service chief is the million naira question. Because I remember that in the letter written to him, for instance, by the Catholic bishops, they said, look, that you have security people who are enjoying your confidence and your trust. And the fact that things have continued unabated, people have continued to die, by the dozens in this country,
properties
that you
destroyed.
have refused to change them, that we can only conclude that they enjoy your confidence, even in spite of what is going on. So you don't want a president that gives that impression that he's incapable and people are dying. And then the last statement he made is also very worrying indeed. He said he will continue to put pressure on the security chiefs who have not delivered. So you have put pressure in the first place, they have died. People have died. You want to put more pressure, so that people die. And then the question Bob Marley, the musician, would ask us is how many more people we have to suffer, how many more people we have to die
before you stop putting pressure and look for another solution.
And look for another solution and all that. So these are things that have actually, worried people. But the president should know ultimately that he campaigned on the basis, in fact, the primary, basis for his campaign, before even the issue of corruption and the economy, was security. Because every other thing, the economy, corruption, every other thing hang on security. If there is no security...
And there is this argument that adopting state police may be a way out of this quagmire. What's your view?
Well, there's a possibility. Of course, it would also have its own problems and so on. I think it depends on how that concept is approached. It depends on how, that policy, is looked into, making sure that you do extra work, you go the extra distance to make sure that you put safeguards in place to avoid abuse. But perhaps it could, because, we know, let us not deceive ourselves, because it is easy to hold a governor responsible in a state for breakdown of law and order. The governor is not, unless he is implicitly involved in it, you understand? But the reality is that you call it, the Constitution says he's the chief security officer, of a state. In practical terms, he's not. He does not have control over the security of his state.
Indeed, he doesn't.
You understand? He doesn't. And even though, yes, he's collecting the security votes and so on, which is one other way of siphoning funds, out of the states, as far as I am concerned. But the reality, is that he cannot give instruction to the security chiefs, to the commissioner of police. He cannot give instruction to the army commander and so on. They have to take instructions from some other places. So perhaps if you have a state police and they are adequately armed, and they have allegiance to their state, for instance, maybe they will go out of their way. Because what is going on is that there is a conspiracy not at the level of the state. Even if there is at the level of the state, it could be minimal, but there is a conspiracy at a much higher level beyond the state.
Regional. And that's why I must ask you this last question. Is the herder issue purely a matter for crime fighting, or do we have to resolve it with a political...
No, ultimately, all conflicts are resolved at the negotiating table. All conflicts, ultimately. But you see, again, there is the long-term approach and there is the immediate-term approach. I would have suggested that, the issue of self-defense is an inalienable right. People should be allowed to defend themselves. But if the government says they are worried that could be abused, then what they need is to embed government security officials within the local militias that will be created for the purpose of self-defense. To take away the ability of people to defend themselves, and yet you cannot defend them as a government, is just to sentence these people to acts of suicide.
That's where we're going to have to leave it now. Nachike Chude, political analyst, thank you for joining me on Africa This Week. Thank you for being here. Well, although conflicts between herdsmen and rural communities are far from new, putting a stop to the ugly trend is possible if leaders use every available opportunity to admonish their people on the importance and the necessity for peaceful coexistence. In the meantime, State authorities must rise to the occasion of effectively securing lives and property, ensuring that nomadic mercenaries don't turn out to become the nation's next worst nightmare. I have been your guide, Fadishola Shotingwa. Many thanks for watching, and bye for now.